Well, for the last couple of days, we've been talking about the role of shepherds and their responsibilities. And Peter is really trying to encourage pastors to focus on pastoring, shepherding the people of God, teaching them the Word of God. And also he warns them against some of the pitfalls where you begin to complain and feel like being a pastor is an overburden and, getting tired of doing the work of God and putting up with the nonsense and blah, blah, blah. As my pastor used to say, that sometimes we start beating the sheep instead of leading the sheep. And it's easy to do. Sometimes you can get in the pulpit and it's really easy to make people feel really guilty and ashamed, especially if they're sincere, earnest Christians who are trying to do the work of God and live up to the Christian ideals. We need to instruct people. We also need to always be reminding them that we're saved by the grace of God. We're empowered by the grace of God. We're affected by the grace of God. And we all are sinners. I mean, we fall short of the glory of God on a regular basis. And that's why God has grace to forgive us. And he promises to restore us and build us back up when we mess up. All of that being said, he adds one more dimension, because I talked yesterday about the people who do ministry because they want the paycheck or they want their enrichment. And we see a lot of that in the prosperity gospel, the feel-good gospel, where the ideal today has become, you need to become a megachurch pastor. And it's kind of an interesting thing, because I remember once I was invited to a pastor's gathering, and it was a time of prayer, and I enjoyed that. And afterwards, as I was exiting, the guy who had organized the meeting thanked me for coming. And he said, I've been praying that some of the significant pastors in our community would start attending these meetings. And I was shocked. I said, well, I think we're all significant. And he goes, well, you know what I mean. And I thought to myself, yeah, I know exactly what you mean, that I'm more significant than somebody else because I have more people in my congregation than the other guy does. So therefore, I have more clout, more impact. And quite honestly, I mean, my executive talked about having a conversation just the other day with somebody who was saying, wanting us to get behind one of their things, because he said, well, we have a lot of firepower in our church, a lot of impact. And when we get behind things, we can really push things. And it's kind of like, it's a strange dynamic, because it's not by might, it's not by strength, it's by my spirit, saith the Lord. And so when we lose sight of that, we start walking in the flesh. We start taking pride in nickels and noses, and numbers become important to us. And we begin to define our own validity based upon how many people listen to us or follow what we do. I had to kind of make a conscious decision to not count. And I don't want to know how many people attend my church. I don't want to know how many people follow me on these broadcasts or anything else like that. I just don't want to know, because, the first thing I'll do is start doing things in reference to who's out there. And I'll start thinking about, well, maybe I need to be more careful in what I say, and on and on and on. And suddenly it's so easy for an artificiality to come in. And I would love to say to you that I'm bigger man than that, and I would never fall susceptible to that. I don't think I am. I think I am, I can be pretty caught up in arrogance just about like you can. So I'm no exception to the rule. So the simple fact is, if God blesses people through what I do, then praise God. It's not for me to count or keep track of that. God's keeping track in heaven. And I would just say that if there are any pastor who taking the time to listen to this, and you probably have better things to do than listen to me, but I would just want to say a word of encouragement. Don't rate the value of what you're doing based upon how many people are listening to you. I often think, and Dietrich Bonhoeffer's always had a profound impact on my understanding of what it means to be a servant of God. And I realized that he died alone in a prisoner of war camp, in a concentration camp in Germany, that when he was hung, he was naked and he was hung by the neck till he was dead. And they buried his body in the ground someplace. His body's never been found. His family didn't even know that he was dead until they heard it being broadcast on the British broadcasting system. I mean, it's the most ignoble way you can die, and yet his life still is having a tremendous impact. You have guys like Oswald Chambers, who was an army chaplain serving in Egypt, who's writing these daily devotionals, and after he's dead, his wife compiles all this stuff and publishes it. And many of us have been blessed and encouraged for decades since then, 100 years since then, simply because he was expressing his relationship with Christ in a very meaningful way. He never got the applause upon earth, but he now gets to enjoy the applause of heaven. And I think it's important for us to understand that, because what Peter goes on to say in verse 3 is that we're not to be lords over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And it's interesting because I find that sometimes when people get into positions of authority, they like to direct other people on what to do, especially if it's something that they don't want to do. And it's a temptation, for me as a pastor. I mean, sitting down and talking with people about their problems is pretty exhausting, actually. It takes a lot of energy. And I refer people a lot of times to my staff because I don't have enough time or energy to speak to everybody that has a need. But at the same time, I never want to put myself in a place where I'm not available to talk to people. And I make myself available when I'm at church, and many times I'll take appointments, and maybe I shouldn't share that, but I do have a limited amount of times that I can meet with people, and I try to if I'm able to, because I never want to get to the place where I'm not hearing what people are going through, that I become out of touch with what people are dealing with in their day-to-day life. And I find that there are people who just struggle all the time with real hardships. I mean, recently I go through these regular phlebotomies because I have this weird blood disorder, and it's kind of, I go to an infusion center where a lot of people are receiving chemotherapy, and I go in, instead of having something put in, I'm having blood taken out. But it's really interesting because I'm very fortunate not to be where they're sitting, and yet it's been very, very instructive to me to sit around with people in a room who are really facing some really difficult times. They're having to deal with a lot of pain and difficulty and sickness and illness, even life-threatening stuff. And it just gives you a whole new perspective. You understand the hardships they go through, and you appreciate the people who care for them. It's been an example to me to watch the courage that many of these people display when they're having to deal with chemotherapy and things of that nature. And I think that's part of what it means to live our lives out amongst one another, that we're not put in a position to dictate to other people what they should do without conscious awareness that if I'm not doing what I'm asking them to do, then I shouldn't be doing it. If I tell you you need to be in the Word and I'm not in the Word, then something's wrong. When I tell you to pray and I'm not praying, then something's wrong. There'll be a hollowness in my words if I'm not willing to tell other people about Jesus and have that conversation, or to really confront somebody with something that they shouldn't be doing. If I'm not willing to go into the kind of the tunnel of chaos with people who are having chaotic moments in their life, then when I'm talking to people, my teaching becomes kind of hollow because it's not based upon personal experience or personal hardship and difficulty. And that's the whole point, that the ability to be in that position is something that's entrusted to us. And you know what that means, entrusted? It means when I put my money in the bank, I'm entrusting my money to the bank. If they take my money, they have stolen it and they've committed a crime. And the point is that when something is entrusted to us, we're responsible to care for it. And that's why those who are called to the ministry, to any kind of ministry, whether it's pastoring or anything else, if it's teaching a Sunday school class, you are entrusted with those kids to teach them, to care for them. If you're basically an usher, greeting people at the door, helping people find their seats, direct them in what they need to do, you've been entrusted with that capacity, that ability, that authority to help people have a positive experience. And I think about people in our church even who, we serve breakfast every morning on Sunday mornings, and all these meals that are being served, and the people who work in the kitchen, we have a pizza oven. Sometimes we cook pizza dinners, stuff. And the people who do that do it with such love and grace and energy and hardship. I mean, they're working really hard. Sometimes they pay with their own pocket to provide things for other people just to make it a little more special. And I look at that and think how glorious that is in the eyes of God, because they know that they have been given a gift that is able to prepare and serve food that helps other people and meets their needs and makes it just a wonderful time of food and fellowship. And they take that trust seriously. It's not something they take for granted or take in a cavalier way. They do it with all their heart, mind, soul, body, and strength. And I pray that they're blessed and their breed will increase. They're great examples to the rest of us. God bless you. We'll continue tomorrow.